All right, let's go ahead now and bring in Senator Tom Cotton. He serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Sir, just hearing this news that Hamas says they have agreed to the terms of the ceasefire without specifying what those terms are, it's mighty hard for the Israelis to agree to a ceasefire when Hamas has not even been truthful or forthcoming about how many hostages remain in captivity and how many of them are even alive at this point.
Well, Jillian, we'll have to see exactly what Israel says they received from Hamas, but this sounds suspiciously like an info operation trying to win a PR war because Hamas knows it can't win a military war against Israel, nor can you negotiate with them in good faith. As you said, we don't even know how many of the hostages remain alive. We hope most of them do, but I think we have to accept the reality that many, or even most, might already be dead. Hamas won't even provide proof of life photos or videos. It would not be hard for Hamas to put today's newspaper in front of these hostages and have them speak a few words into the camera, but then that would reveal their ace cards, how many hostages they still have alive. And Hamas is not going to do that, and they're especially not going to do that as long as Joe Biden continues to pressure Israel to give Hamas what it wants more than all, which is its continued existence. Israel is dedicated to Hamas's destruction. There are 4 Hamas battalions left in Rafah. Every time Joe Biden says, or his senior aides say, we don't want Israel to take down these battalions in Rafah, we demand that they reopen these gates so supplies can get in, apparently now withholding ammunition from Israel, all it does is make Hamas less likely to agree to any kind of hostage release because they think they're going to get from Joe Biden's pressure what Israel is otherwise only getting when they apply military pressure to Hamas.
At least according to one report I saw, Israel or Netanyahu in that call did agree to reopen the Kerem Shalom crossing for humanitarian assistance. Reuters is reporting on this. Here's what it said about Israel's rejection of the Hamas deal. Israeli official says Hamas announcement appears to be a ruse to cast Israel as the side refusing a deal. And there's a tremendous amount of pressure on Biden, too, from the left. Listen to what Bernie Sanders posted on X. He said 1 million people have fled to Rafah. For months, the U.S. has warned against an attack. Netanyahu ignored the warnings. Now an assault is imminent. It will kill countless civilians. President Biden must back his words with action, end all offensive military aid to Israel. I mean, why wouldn't Hamas see an opportunity here?
Well, John, that's exactly right. Again, as long as Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, keeps putting pressure on Israel, it makes Hamas that much less likely to actually agree to release any of these hostages. The only reason they restarted negotiations a few weeks ago is because the invasion of Rafah appeared imminent. The only time Hamas has been willing to release hostages is when they are feeling intense military pressure. And every time Joe Biden and the Democrats say that Israel should not proceed with this war, they demand a ceasefire, then Hamas is simply emboldened. Look at what Hamas is saying about these disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate on our campuses, little Gazas all around the country. They're celebrating them because they know that puts more pressure on Joe Biden and the Democrats to demand that Israel capitulate, as opposed to what they should be doing. If these people want Gazans to stop suffering, they should demand that Hamas release all the hostages and unconditionally surrender.
Which, to be fair, they have been doing since day one, and Hamas could have foreseeably ended the conflict at any point in time by doing so. We're looking at live pictures here outside Al-Aqsa Hospital in Gaza, the site of a bombing that was due to a Hamas Palestinian sympathizer terrorist unit misfiring earlier in the war. We heard, Senator, from UNICEF over the weekend that there's about 600,000 children inside Rafah right now. What steps could the IDF take to not necessarily protect them, but prevent them from being unnecessarily brought into this?
Well, first off, UNICEF is an agency of the United Nations, which itself is a cesspool of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hate. So I'm not sure I would credit what UNICEF reports.
Well, Senator, that number is widely accepted to be true. So I'm just putting that out there. The 600,000.
Well, there's no doubt that there are civilian casualties and civilian suffering in Gaza. That is always the case in war. The sole responsibility rests with Hamas, however. Hamas invaded Israel, slaughtered more Jews than at any time since the Holocaust. It brought this war on Gaza. If it wants to stop civilian suffering and casualties in Gaza, it can unconditionally surrender, just like Germany did in May of 1945, just like Japan did after we nuked them twice. The war was not finished by then. Those countries were not totally occupied, but their de facto governments unconditionally surrendered to stop further civilian deaths. That's exactly what Hamas could do here. They are solely responsible for the civilian casualties in this war.
And there's no sign that Hamas would be willing to do that. There's too much at stake for them for this. Let me come back to this report that Biden was withholding weapons shipments to Israel. It was carried in Axios over the weekend. It said, "Scoop, U.S. put a hold on ammunition shipment to Israel." Here's how the Wall Street Journal editorial board read that. They said, quote, "Perhaps the weapons delay was intended as a message to Hamas that the U.S. is willing to arm twist Israel to stop the Rafah campaign. But that's the diplomatic logic that has kept the war going as long as it has since October 7th. Israel's government can't end the war with Hamas's military brigades intact, and that means going into Rafah, as difficult as it may be." It would seem to me, Senator, that Netanyahu and even the Unity War Cabinet is looking at this and saying, there's no way that we can't go into Rafah and leave those 4 battalions intact, because if we do, eventually they'll reconstitute. It'll be October 7th all over again. So do you think that despite the pressure that Biden's bringing on Israel, it's going to go ahead in Rafah?
I think they have to. That's what Prime Minister Netanyahu and the cabinet has said. That's what public opinion polls reflect in Israel. This is not just the decision of one man or a handful of men in the war cabinet. This is the overwhelming public sentiment in Israel after suffering that October 7th atrocity. And if these reports are true about Joe Biden withholding ammunition from Israel, it may be the worst blunder yet of his administration around the world, maybe worse than the withdrawal from Afghanistan, because it does exactly send that signal to Hamas that they do not need to surrender. They do not need to release the hostages. They can count on Joe Biden to force Israel to capitulate, as opposed to backing Israel to the hilt from the very beginning. If Joe Biden had done that, this war probably would already be over. It's another pattern you see of President Biden all around the world, never playing to win, only trying to avoid losing by the barest margins.
We learned on Thursday and Friday, Senator, the Biden administration internally is considering the potential to allow thousands of Palestinians trapped in Gaza to enter the U.S. on refugee visas. What do you think about that potential move?
Insane. Look, there are reasons why Egypt, an American partner, does not want Gazans coming into its own territory. They know what a dangerous threat it is. So either they need to go into shelters in Gaza, or we need to work with countries like Egypt or other countries in the region if there are going to be refugees leave Gaza. That is always the preferred method of dealing with refugees, keeping them as close as possible to their home country. To fly thousands of Arabs out of Gaza into the United States, just like we've let millions of people cross our border illegally, would be the height of folly.
Just very quickly, Senator, countries like Jordan, Egypt have already said, we're not taking them in, citing security concerns.
And if Jordan and Egypt won't take them in because of security concerns, what does it say about Joe Biden's judgment to even consider bringing them to the United States?
Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas, good to catch up with you, sir. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.